and this topic is very unrehearsed. I just want to create some openness to discussing something that is extremely hard to articulate. So basically what you are, and it only applies to less than 1% of the public. So most people hearing this will completely just dismiss it.
They'll be like, what the heck are you talking about?
But you are going to be the objective voice in the room where you can ask all of your questions and dig deeper into it. Because it's not a prepared articulation of the depth of this idea, your job is to dig.
Sort of just like thinking out loud.
Yeah, because I think a lot about you, especially over the weekend. And so when I'm in my my neural modes, like you are most connected to some of the crazy stuff that we talk about where it's neurological development or open to paranormal or all of that, because it's all in the same vein. And I think a lot of your experiences are you are open to it and you flirt with it and you're interested in it and it guides you. Yeah. I don't think you have a great understanding, so a lot of your conclusions end up in just your fascination with it rather than understanding with what you're doing.
I'd agree with that.
But as a person who uses all of this stuff, right, I want to talk about the brain and how it's used and some of the lesser known features and benefits of using your brain, because I think most people don't use it to what it's capable of doing because of a misunderstanding of how they should be using it, right? And so maybe we add a little bit of depth to your understanding of what it is. But the problem with it is how much dismissing that you have to do on the onset. To actually use your brain, you actually have to forget a lot of the things that you think you know. And I think a lot of people hold on to the things they think they know, almost like a scientist. I have discussions with people who, in the scientific community, who have a hard time taking some of the more dogmatic elements of science. And the reason they do that is they're like, if they take things that they were shown or taught to by other people, right, and just predicate today's stuff on things that people did in the 1900s or the 1400s or the 1200s, then they would be not able to evolve. They'd be constantly talking about things they already know.
Yeah.
But the problem is, most of what you know, you have heard from other people, and you're trusting the fact that those other people knew what they were talking about so that you can evolve forward. But what happens in that sort of like bucket of information? What if there's some wrongness in there? What if there's some things that are, prohibiting you from hitting a benchmark of enlightenment?
What if you're building on something that's incorrect?
Yeah. So the first thing is you have to have an openness to know that everything you think you know at this point is bullshit. And it's a tough undertaking. But let's just suspend everything. You know nothing, and everybody before you also knew nothing. And there was only a really small percentage of people that were using their brain in the proper way. So what is proper way? All right. So you are you're a pretty logical thinker, objective logical thinker.
Am I?
You are.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, okay. Let's use that as the first discussion topic.
Yeah.
Okay. What is logical thinking?
That's a good question. I mean, to me, when I hear that someone is a logical thinker, I just always sort of assume that they can easily look at all sides of something sort of objectively, mathematically, without emotion, without bias, sort of just like if this, then this, without a lot of gray area, if that makes sense.
Okay. Well, we're going to come down a couple of different levels, because really your perceptions are like the human perceptions, right? The sky is blue, the grass is green, water's wet. Like, you've already come to a certain amount of conclusions based on what you can measure. Like, you can look at the sky and see that it is blue, and so you absolutely know the information you're receiving orders sky being blue is something you don't have to think about again. So if you think about it in the terms of everything is information, light is information, numbers are information, words are information. Like, our brain's a computer, and it's processing information, and it puts it into two boxes: things we know and mysterious things that we don't know. All right. And our brains will fight to sort of order things and try to get out of getting a new understanding for something that we already know. Enlightenment happens when you kind of push on the things that you think that you know and try to rediscover whether or not you should really feel the same way about those things. That's true nature of science as far as I'm concerned. All right, so let's use some examples. So if you're familiar with crossword puzzles, right? Mm-hmm. And let's just say, what about the word searches where you circle the different letters?
Yeah.
Okay, so that in itself is a block of information, okay? And you have two sides of the information. You have complete entropy, right? And you have complete order. Now, think about, like, picture the word search where you're circling things. And on one side of complete order, there is just every line is a recognizable word where there aren't two letters together that don't make any sense to you, right? Logical thinking that is in the highest order, right, of informational order.
Okay.
Now, entropy would be random letters that no matter how hard you try, there isn't a single word that could be made of any two letters that are there, right? So you look at the word search and a logical brain wants to look through the chaos of the word search and find words in there. Look at the clouds and want to find pictures there. Want to find some kind of things that make sense because that will make us feel really good. And that's why word searches are so fun, because we're taking chaos and we're assembling a little bit of order and we're trying to make sense of something that otherwise is kind of mysterious. That's our sweet spot as human beings, by the way. There's just enough mystery, but there's just enough order. And that's where we're happiest, right in the middle.
Like, we know there's an answer. We're not there yet, but we're looking for it, knowing that we will get it.
Yes. And there's potential and possibility in that. So if let's just say we made it harder and we made a translation happen from letters to binary. So the word search was just binary numbers. So you'd have to actually solve the binary to get to the letter to form the word, to circle the word, right? So that's a level of complication that might be a little bit too much entropy for the logically minded. So you can kind of fit yourself in how much order is necessary for you to feel comfortable and how much entropy is just too much where you just cannot find any kind of peace.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And so this is the first... this is sort of like the first test to see how willing and likely you are to, I don't know, like, be open to the mysterious.
Ooh.
Like, does projection, astral projection or, some kind of like remote viewing or paranormal information, when you flirt with that, you're like, you have an interest in maybe seeing there's information beyond what normal people are perceptive to. But at the same time, in that, how much of it would be too entropic? Like, what if I told you life isn't real and it's all simulation, or people aren't even real? They're mostly NPC characters and they're just information that your perception builds around your environment to make sense of it, right? Yeah. Where's your comfort level there?
A comfort level is going with what I thought I knew. Like, well, that's not true. We are real people. We're really here because that's what I've been led to believe my whole life. Your
logical brain fighting that information.
Yeah.
Are you open to the fact that people don't really exist? This interaction is just information exchange on a cosmic level where we're not even real. There's something in me that's gathering information from another source and it's being manifested in a Kelin.
Yeah. That would be interesting.
Okay, so here's where I say that the logically minded is a disadvantage in this fact, where that 99% of people will push back against the, will believe in the paranormal, but not really. Do you know why?
Why?
There's frickin' no utility in it. Right?
Yeah.
If I said that I had the best tool in the world and it was called a dingle hopper and do you want one, right? You don't know what it's for, so it might be sexy that you have this tool that I say is really useful, but without utility, you don't know what the frick to do with it. Like, what's the usefulness of a tool of being able to see in the fabric of time and space to be able to see information that nobody else can see. If you're like, what do I do with it? Even if I get there.
Like if we are all in a simulation and it can even be proven that that's a fact, do you still have to get up and go to work every day? Yep.
Do you though? Do you?
I mean, unless you can manipulate your surroundings in your simulation, if you're still in this simulation that requires money and shelter and food and a way of
that's
life.
your logical brain, who is really just a dick. Like I associate the logic side of your brain with the ego side of your brain with the biggest dick that is the most prohibitive force in human beings.
Oh,
okay?
yeah.
So what if you, again, we got to go back and take things we think we know and devolve them down to uncertainty. So things you think you know, put a question mark on them and say, let's revisit this. There wouldn't be many constraints on it if you were just the, think of a 60s flower child who just went with the whims of whatever
Peace
they
and
were,
love.
right?
Yeah.
And they didn't have those outside constraints that managed to tell them what it is to do. They went with the flow.
Yeah.
Well, the rest of us mock that, right?
Yeah.
Because the logical side of our brain say that's dangerous and that's
irresponsible,
insincere. Like there's nothing about that any of us crave, except for the person that's willing to say, I denounce all of your rules and your responsibilities. I'm going to do my thing. And then the logical brain, we're like, let's measure it. Let's take 5 years of doing the flower child deal where you just do whatever, and where are you at? And the things that we would measure would be logical things, not spiritual or paranormal or, neural connection. Like what did they develop when they were in their free flow, right?
Yeah.
That you didn't develop because in your logical construct. Right?
Yeah.
And so the evolution of the species and what, if I wrote a manual, and here's the worst part. When I was a kid, I studied people who invested in the stock market, right? And do you know what my one realization is that if someone was really good at investing in the stock market, why would they ever tell anybody? Why wouldn't they just use the skill set to do it themselves, become wealthy, right?
Yeah.
And never teach another soul to do it. So that lived in my brain for a little bit, like it's not altruistic, it's not philanthropic, there's not somebody that wants to be a good person by doing it, right? So what is that? If there's an expert that's willing to show you how to do something that they're just not doing themselves, what are they? Are they an authority, or are they filling a role?
Are they doing it for free, or are they gaining something by doing it?
Doesn't matter. At some point, if I said you have the secrets of the universe and you can make anything turn into gold, and then you went home and you just were like, woman, I need some gold. I'm going to turn on the turn something on gold button. I'm going to turn this to gold. I'm going to sell it. I'm going to have an infinite resource of gold. There wouldn't be a day where you're like, I'm going to teach other people how to do gold. There wouldn't. It's not a utility that is something that would risk something that you have, that you could personally use, that you can always use, and goes to, I want to now teach somebody else how to turn things into gold. There isn't. Like a natural tendency is not that. There's not.
I mean, I guess you're right. My brain went to, oh, sure, I'd show family and friends. And then I thought, would I just give it? Like, I'll do it and I'll give it to family and friends.
Okay, so what if turning the gold would have you judged, mocked, maybe put to death, right? Ridiculed, and then people would think lesser of you if you tried to show people, because they wouldn't accept the fact that human beings can turn things into gold. So the upside is that you'd help other people turn things to gold. The downside is you would be diminished and maybe executed and felt whatever. Now would you keep it to yourself?
Yes.
You would keep it to yourself, right?
Especially, if I'm going to be executed.
Neurological development and being able to go outside, right? Mm-hmm. If you're doing it yourself, then you don't have any natural reason or, there's nothing.
Motivation.
There really isn't a motivation to tell other people how to do it. So if somebody has mastered neurological development where they can connect with the fabric of space and time and get an understanding of the world, right? Everybody who's doing it won't talk to you because for obvious reasons. And the people who are talking are really just bullshit, and they're not really able to do it, but they have an end, right? So the information is under lock of what human beings are open to doing. Okay, so for instance, do you meditate?
No.
Do you know how to meditate?
No.
Are you interested in knowing how to meditate?
Yeah.
All right. So the first step I already told you is disconnecting from what you think you know and being open to anything new. You being the jury, you being the judge, and you being able to decide whether or not something exists. So if you're like, can I connect with people who are no longer living in their body, right? Mm-hmm. Now, everybody is going to have a little element of their brain that through the process cannot be open forever. You can have little short stints with being open to there being a paranormal being somewhere.
Being open to the idea, you mean?
Yeah.
Okay.
Open to the idea in words, like you want to be open, you're attracted to being open. But there's a little voice in here. This is the dick that I was talking about.
Yeah.
The dick is going to say, hey, I'm the logical guy here, and I'm the ego, and I'm going to judge this, and I'm going to make suggestions like, is it real? Did I just make that up? Do I want to believe in this?
Are you being silly?
Are you being silly? Exactly.
Yeah.
All of those things, right? So really knowing that the dick is inside you. Wait, that was really bad wording.
I got what you mean by that. I got it.
Knowing that he lives inside, that's still bad. So
knowing that there's always that voice there. Yeah.
You wouldn't do it. You wouldn't say the words. So
I was trying to reframe it, but there's really no better way to say it. Yeah.
So knowing that really meditation is not prayer, that might be sort of like a strategy in quieting, but knowing how to take the logical dickhead that's in your brain and giving that person no voice whatsoever. So meditation is taking the logical, the formulaic, the crossword puzzle that needs to make sense, and being able to look into the void of total entropy and not giving that microphone to the dickhead.
I've heard somewhere recently, I think it was prayer, they said the difference between like prayer and meditation is prayer is filling your mind with things, and engaging meditation is emptying your mind.
Yes, and they are connected. They are completely connected.
Okay.
So, if your science guy in your brain started reading the Bible, there would be objections every other word, right? And those objections would be instead of questioning and more conversations and more mystery. And the book's been around forever.
Yeah.
There aren't answers to the questions that your logical brain is going to have.
Oh, yeah.
So
I recently started reading, and I'm like, seriously, nobody called bullshit on this? Like, so there's no way.
The invention that your brain is going to make is through something called faith that is going to give in the fact that it logically doesn't make sense and be okay with looking into the randomness of the numbers and still wanting to know more. Mm-hmm. That's you taking Mr. Dickhead in your brain and saying, hey, logical guy, you don't get the microphone right now. None of this is going to make sense, right? Mm-hmm, and you are now positioned, 100th in line.
Yeah.
Okay? But it accomplishes the same goal, it's just done through different means. So someone who meditates can take the microphone away, just like the faith person can also take the microphone away. But both of them are then delving into areas that aren't supposed to make sense, even though we want it to make sense. And the deeper you get into faith or the deeper you get into meditation, the more open you are to things that have no order to them. And that's the point, is the order is constructed by us and our really analog senses that cannot be trusted, and giving it into some mathematics that are way above our ordered brain's capacity.
Okay. And that's hard to do. I mean, I there's been a couple of times where I guess I would have attempted to meditate or quiet the mind or whatever. And all I get is like this voice in my head saying, am I doing it yet? Is it quiet?
Yeah.
Nope, you're thinking. Well, you're still thinking.
And that's why typically people do not get by the first step, which is suspending the authority of all information that you think you've collected at this point. And the second step is being able to quiet the logical side of your brain and open to the possibilities and potentialities of information that doesn't have any kind of order, right? When you skew towards entropy, you get chaos.
Yeah.
And chaos is not supposed to make sense because it holds all of the energy that does everything else, right? And so phase 2 then is, phase 1 is suspending what you think you know so you don't poison the new information that you're going to get. Phase 2 is suspending the order because obviously your order is predicated on information that might be skewed or incorrect. But then once you get exposure, then you have to have some utility. Then you have to give your ordered brain, take some of that energy and entropy and make sense of it. Find some utility in what are you using it for. So if you're doing remote viewing, for instance, is remote viewing possible? And what makes it possible? Your ordered brain wants to know this, just like if it read the Bible, they want to know how someone is 800 years old or there was a big flood or a whale, swallowed someone. There has to be some things about it that make sense to us or else we're closed off and whatever. So if you're okay, are you open to remote viewing?
Are you talking about the ability to see things that have happened when you weren't there?
Yeah.
I guess I'm open to it. I've heard of people that claim to have, they call it like picking up on someone's energy, where they were able to visualize someone that was maybe, if one woman told me she was at a friend's house and kept seeing this young boy in her mind. And the more she talked about him and described him, somebody was like, oh, that's my nephew. He was here last week. And because she was where he was, she's seeing that or something of that nature. That might be a little different, but I'm open to the idea of why not? Why not?
Well, let's dig deeper. What would have to exist in order for that to be a possibility? And try not to make the mistake of giving it sort of like a premeditated, like a something that you're basing it on information that you already know. Base it on possibility of what could be of something you don't know or whatever, because there's very few real conclusions that you made yourself that doesn't have a bias of somebody else's understanding and somebody else's conclusions. So that's why I scrap it all, because I don't trust everybody that came before me, and they might have ulterior motives and they might have not my interest at heart. So why would I take something and expect that they did due diligence and they kept it objective and they knew enough about science to be able to make a good conclusion? So back to the original question. So what would have to exist in order for remote viewing to be something? And before you answer that, if there are people that legitimately can do it, then it is a possibility. I don't know anybody who I can measure to find out if what they're doing is true, right? That's all I know about this. That's all the information I have. So in our crossword puzzle, we know that there are people that say that they can do it, and they have gone through practices that, underline that with highlighter, that there's a possibility. So why it's happening, and now we can give Mr. Logical Brain the ability to say what would have to be in order for remote viewing to be possible.
And I mean, I sort of even, when you talk about remote viewing, I'm sort of even picturing two different things. One is sort of seeing something that was, but is no longer. One is active. You are seeing something in present, current time happening.
Are both possible?
Maybe.
Okay.
Maybe. When I think about the idea of seeing something that was there that maybe no longer is, I think of concepts like photography, using light, using bright flashes of light to capture images somewhere. You can take a picture of something and look at that picture, but that's no longer there. They were there. The image was captured. It has moved, yet we still have proof of the image. So I almost see it in like, is there a way that someone could still perceive that image without a device like a camera or an actual bulb or anything of that. But like my brain says, is there a correlation somehow?
Well, we're going to bridge that gap. We got to get through that gap because you have to look at what is possible for you to perceive something when our primary information collecting device is our eyes. And if we're seeing something that our eyes aren't seeing, we have to be using a sense that is not our eyes. So what sense would have to be there, right? That in order for us to see it.
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know. I mean, the other side I've heard of, like, we always talk about near-death experiences, and I saw a video one time of a person saying they were in surgery and for several minutes died on the table and could describe what their like stepdad or whoever it was, some family member, while waiting in the hospital, went out to the hallway, went to the vending machine, got a candy bar, came back, and this person described all that as it was happening once they woke up. So yeah, what is that? They're not using their physical eyes, obviously.
Okay. So human beings are capable of perceiving things information. I'm going to use proper words here. So receiving information that came to them without using the senses, right? So it's possible. So what would make it possible for you to receive, like if you get an email, you're basically getting one computer that takes information and it changes forms, it translates it to another piece, sends it over a digital connection, and then reformulates it and then translates it back into something that is readable by you. Okay? So what we're missing here is we have the experience of the person, and the gap between the two is how it's getting to another person without that person having firsthand perception of that. Or it's not entering in the way that normal things enter into their brain.
Like
that is the overall question. Well, don't commit to the words that other people have told you. All right? You just have to be open that it's information and it's getting to a person not using traditional methodology, right?
Right.
So, again, the original question is, how can information get to you without using traditional methodology?
See, and my brain keeps thinking there's still that little a dick in the background that's like, is it possible? You can't answer that. You have accounts of people saying it is, but are they lying? You have accounts of people telling these stories. Is it made up for show? Do we even know that it is possible or anyone has done it? We don't know if they're being truthful or not.
So there are evidences of someone sitting in one room and being able to clear their brain, going into a meditative state, and associating pictures with numbers. And
you're talking about like what they did on Ghostbusters?
Real close. Close. So
Okay.
They've tested this to see if someone could grab information that their eyes didn't capture and do it with pretty pretty high
Accuracy.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so in that quells the logical side that says that there's somebody who is able to do it. So my brain wants to know.
And how do we know? What is this evidence?
What?
How do we know that the evidence is legit?
Well, we have to go on the hypothetical. I wasn't in the room, and I'm basically.
So the discussion is based on the fact that there's trustworthy evidence.
There's some people who don't have skin in the game, or someone who doesn't benefit or not benefit, someone who's interested in it to see if it's possible. And there are enough of those people to at least have you ask the question, can someone grab information when they're not being in the same room and never had any of their analog senses pick up that information? Can that information be received?
Okay.
Yes, there are numerous of them. So one path is that it's all bullshit and nothing exists and it's not worthwhile of a digging. And the other one's like, we're open to the fact that there might be a potential of someone who can connect with information, whatever. And if it is, that's our first possibility. And if you can develop the ability to collect information with you not being in the same room, you'd have to have two things. Obviously, you never collected it, so you were never in the same space. So you'd have to then take space and take it out of the equation and say, there's no distance between me and the picture that I'm trying to accurately describe because I've never seen it and I've never been there. But if space didn't exist, then me and the picture could be in the same room. And if there's a way for me gathering the information in the same room, whether or not I'm there or not, I can connect with that thing. So it's a hard haul, okay? Because we can't picture, the dick in our brain can't picture us being in the same space with all things. And then you have time, the separation between I could be there, but I'm not, right?
Yeah.
It would take me time and I'd have to follow a distance to go look at that, collect the information and bring it back. But is there a way I can get to the information? Because the information exists. Somebody could see it, even if it's not me. So that's like the first journey in whether or not you're like, I get to that third step and I'm like, yeah, there's no utility to this. Even if I could, I can't. Even if I shouldn't, even if I could, I probably shouldn't delve into it because it seems like a lot of expensive energy. And then what do I get? I can tell you if I go in the museum, I could tell you what artwork's on the other. And then what?
Like
What do you do
it's a party
with that?
trick.
Exactly. All right. But let's pause it right there. And if you were to develop your brain and being able to collect information that it has not been exposed to, right? And all it would take is you doing some meditation, connecting with information, and being open to whether or not you get anything delivered to you or not. If you can get some, you create just enough mystery and void for very quiet voices from that void to tell you stuff. And then you can decide whether or not you can put any order to the random characters that you're getting from that void.
This reminds me of a game one time my husband and my kids and I played. We were out at dinner at a restaurant and we had time to kill waiting for our food. And we decided to try to guess what color each other was thinking. And I think I was guessing at one point, or maybe we both were. This is the thing. It's what we did. So I would look at my kids or my husband or somebody, and I'd say, "You got your color?" "Yes." And I'd say, "Give it to me." And we would just stare and try to clear your mind. And I'm like, just do nothing but think of this color. And after a minute, I'd be like, "Okay, you ready?" And we'd say 1, 2, 3. And you both say the color at the same time. And at one point, 3 in a row, dead on. Both people, brown, yellow, green. And I mean, it got to the point that we were like laughing hysterically. And then it stopped. It went away. We couldn't do it. We can't do it again. So we're always thinking, was that just a huge coincidence? Or was there information being passed somehow?
Being that I do this on the regular, let me tell you how to make it work.
Okay.
Number one, what works against you is trying to make it work. One of the responsibility, or one of the disciplines of meditation is that, you're clearing your brain of all binding, all responsibility. So the discipline is disconnecting with responsibility. Now, if you get enamored with the results of clearing your brain and then you start wanting the thing, it's almost impossible to make it happen again or happen on command. So that's why the state of being in a meditative state is essential, because it takes the ego and the dickhead in your brain out of the equation, because then it ruins the intuition and the perceptions of what you're supposed to be. So, one of the most helpful things that I raised today would be the crossword puzzle. You go into meditation, you're going to get exposed to information, it may not make sense, or it might totally make sense, and you're okay either way. So now you've created an openness to be able to collect information. If it delivers something, cool. And if it didn't, that's cool too. Now you're in the preferred state for receiving information. If you were like, I'm going to the meditative state and I need to get something and it better be good, you're not getting shit at all. And so that creates a quandary, because you're doing an exercise through logical means, but the logical means destroy the results of the exercise. If you go into the entropy flower child, I don't really care if I get anything or not, I'm here for the experience and the exposure to information, right? How much of that voice you can quell, like you can really kill it off, the deeper the information pool. And this is the only sort of absolute truth about this that I know. I go to that well, I get good information. I don't try to get good information, but I've been able to use a lot of information that I've got from what's come to me through that information. So if you're like, hey, I'm open to remote viewing, I know that there are people that have seen things, and I'm connected to all human beings, and I could probably, get a channel of data from that's being broadcast into the, to the ether. And if I just think hard enough, and I'm cool if I get some, if I'm cool if I'm not, and I'm really not trying, I'm just open to it. Now you can decipher the information after you receive it, and you don't have to worry about deciphering and demanding what information you receive when you're in the moment. That's really, and that's what I'm saying. Like, that's where I've given you 4 steps, and we lose most people on every one of those 4 steps. So if you have 100% people on step 1, you have about 50% of the people on step 2, you have about 1% of the people on step 3, and you have a percentage of a percentage on step 4. So it's not hard to understand why so few people are open to this kind of stuff. You then couple that with how much you'd be chastised or judged based on your openness and willingness to engage in it. So people like me, who are the information gatherers, I'm just going to hit my channel of information. I'm going to make use of it. And if nobody else does it, I don't give 2 shits, because I do not need other people to join me. I've got a connection to perfect information.
I've even heard people go so far as to say it's evil to even practice that. Meditation, you shouldn't do.
Do you know why, though?
They were saying that you shouldn't clear your brain.
Do you know why? 99% of people who are not open to this are better off never going in this. So the craziness that comes from it is a responsibility that most people will abuse and they'll misuse.
Well, from what different people, and it's always online, different people that have said, you shouldn't do these things. There's one woman I was watching a video. She thinks yoga is evil, meditation is evil.
Right.
Any information, and this woman, she claimed to be a psychic medium for many, many years. And she says, all of that is evil. It's all from the devil. It's all astrology, everything. You shouldn't do any of that stuff. And so I quit it. And yeah, they even said you can't even meditate, because just emptying your brain like that is just nothing but playing with fire. And I'm
okay.
Just like,
so what is evil?
It's bad. Bad stuff.
It seems very, very, very thin.
To me, if evil exists, I would have to then say that evil comes from, hell, the devil, whatever. That there is this entity.
Is there anything that is evil that? All right, so let's just say you have a superpower of invisibility. So good would be utilizing a superpower for something. So I would say, what is the first thing that you do if you're invisible? And you say something like rob a bank, right? Mm-hmm. Or somebody is like, I'm going to rest and relax. So each one of those, right, is you're going to be able to come to a conclusion that one is evil. All right. So if you are invisible, you rob a bank, what makes that evil?
That you're stealing. It's wrong. It's taking from people, it's breaking laws, Is it evil? I see wrong and evil as 2 different things.
Okay. Go ahead, keep going.
I mean, I feel like there's wrong, there's bad choices, there's being selfish, there's being self-centered, there's inconsideration, doing things that benefit you, not caring about other people. All those things to me can be very bad things. Is it in the realm of evil? I don't know.
Well, you're using a standard that is not across all people, right? In order to use a definition, you have to have sort of like an agreed upon what that means. And if it means something different to you, so for instance, if you were selfish, would that be evil? Well, you just said selfishness goes along with it. I'm sure you're selfish 9 times a day, 90 times a day, right? So are you evil?
I don't think so.
So what would not be evil would be a subjective, snapshot based on your ego and you deciding what evil is, rather than sort of like a scientific, I can measure something and the results of that measurement will be evil every time, no matter who it's dealing with. right? So if you steal, but you're hungry, is that stealing? And is stealing evil? Is stealing always evil? Is there sometimes that stealing is not evil? Well, then none of that is scientific because it's coming from a subjective perspective or point of view. So what is evil? Like I have my own standard. Okay. So things that are, so think of like the general ledger of human beings. Okay. And you think of where you're at, and whatever makes you healthy or better or stronger or whatever, right, would be something that would be a good for you. Now there's an overlap with you and I where yours and mine are here. So if something is good for me and it is good for you, there's an overlap. Well, that is a good. But if it's good for me and bad for you, it's no longer a good because my good comes at your expense and now it's not a good anymore. Now you take a third overlap and say, is this good for me? Is this good for Kelin? Is this good for all people? Well, if you pass the test of being good for all, right?
Yeah.
Then it could be something that would be considered good. Evil would be the same thing, where if it is bad for everybody, it is bad for the person I'm with, and it is bad for me. It's bad. There's not a single redeeming quality about the thing, so it is bad. It would be evil. There's nothing about it that has a positive gain when it's invoked. So if you bring out cupcakes and you put it on there, is the cupcake good or evil? Well, you're going to eat it and you're going to have delight in it, and it's going to make you a little unhealthy. It failed the first test. Cupcakes would be evil. If I took a carrot out and put it on the table and you eat the carrot and he eats the carrot and you've got a vitamin A allergy, it wouldn't be good for you, then it doesn't pass. So you only have so many things that can be deemed something that's all good and all bad, and they're not useful. There's no utility in that because no matter what is going to be good or bad to someone else. So it's tough to, like, again, that's the dick in our head that wants to just order things and control things and compartmentalize things. I want to take something and be able to say it's either good, bad, hero, villain, right? But it's very difficult to take information and put it in one of those categories. Absolutely. So that's why I say, like, remote viewing. If I were doing remote viewing, it's a bargain with the devil to get a topic where I'm connecting into information streams that aren't going through any of my perceptions, and I use it to save a kid in a well. Well, would your friends say that because a kid was saved, nobody was damaged because of it, and I just tapped into information that harmed no people? Would that be evil?
That point was actually brought up in this interview with this woman. You know, they said, well, what happens if you use your information for good and it helps somebody and it saves somebody? And I think her explanation was that is still evil, that is still the devil sort of throwing you a bone to keep you wanting to keep doing it.
Okay, well, that's important. Well, what would then be the devil threw you a bone? What's the next step that's the more devious one that's part of the master plan of the devil?
What would be sort of using that to get you to trust what you're doing and want to keep doing it, and then believing what you're doing is a good thing if it's not.
Okay.
Supposedly, I guess.
All right. So, do you think when you do this stuff, you break your brain in a little bit of ways?
I don't know if I would see it as breaking your brain, as more so maybe just exploring or using more. I don't know if I would if we're talking about this like it's a certainty, this can be done, your brain is capable of doing this, then I wouldn't say it would be a broken thing. It would almost just be
it's absolutely breaking your brain.
Is it?
Absolutely breaking your brain.
Have you done this?
What?
Remote viewing?
Yes.
Shut up.
Yes.
No, you haven't.
Totally.
Oh my God, we're going to really go down that road
but
in a minute.
It's part of the one. Okay, so like once you get the pass where you can connect to information visits you whether or not you ask it to or not, because you're in a collection mode. Like you don't really know what's coming to you, and you're not forcing it to come into you in any way. So you get information and you're like, oh, that was useful, right?
Would you count, like when you say information, would you talk about, a lot of people mention the coincidence of you think of someone you haven't talked to in forever, and then all of a sudden they call you up. Would you say that's sort of receiving information that came to you?
Yeah, for sure. For sure. I mean, think about it. Like, being in the computer technology industries, a lot of this sort of has metaphors broken down by what computers do to be able to take the magical thing and put it on the screen. So, you know, our brain kind of knows the possibilities, the potentials of things that are around us. And if you allow your brain to connect to information outside of the, you know, your senses, you get little whispers of things that are likely to occur. So we used the blue car example a whole lot. If there was a possibility that you could direct your interest at something and put your brain on notice that it was free to collect information about that thing, and then you spaced out and quieted things down enough for that information collecting to happen, and then you wouldn't be surprised if you've got the blue car answer that was on the onset, right? Mm-hmm. Well, it's the same thing with information about things that, you know, I don't believe in time. I don't believe in space. So if I can collect information on Mars right now, right, and I take the ego guy, punch him in the face and say, listen, I know that you want to tell me that the space is really far and how much time it would take to get there. But as long as information, when you take time out of the equation, this is sort of my point about why it doesn't become evil or why it breaks your brain. Once you say that time doesn't exist and you're not allowed to use that as sort of like, you know, part of the formulation of why things aren't possible or things are possible, then it breaks how you interact with things. Okay, so now everybody else's pursuit about how fast they have to run towards something they want and how great the distance it is. If you told that person, well, time doesn't really exist and the distance you have to run really doesn't exist, they will look at you like you're looking at me right now. Like, what do you mean? I am bought into the space-time dynamic. Just because you're not, I have no utility in thinking that I can make anything happen right now, and the only reason it takes long as it seems far away is because I believe that. The belief in the space and time and distance. So stop believing in space and time. What's your first step? I mean, it's easy enough for me because I've proven that it doesn't exist. And as soon as something doesn't exist, then everything that's predicated on also tends not to exist. I'm breaking your brain, by the way. This is the process of breaking your brain, is to get to the one thing that's keeping and reinforcing it. Like when I say time doesn't exist, my brain's like, yeah, I know, dude. Your brain is saying
bullshit.
You're saying bullshit. So
why do we have watches and clocks and we do everything based on how much time it's gonna
exactly. So your brain isn't broken yet, and I would tell you that I wouldn't break your brain if I were you, because if once your brain is broken, then there might be other ramifications from breaking your brain. Maybe things that really need you to have a good relationship with time no longer do, and now you're an unreliable person who can't be counted on.
Like, I could just start being late for things, and they're like, why are you always late? Because time doesn't exist.
Exactly. Because normal people will take a superpower and they'll use it in ways that affect other people. So if I use my premonitions or I use my access to information and nobody ever knew I was doing it and nobody was affected by it, it benefited me and hurt no one. That would be the calling of something that is not evil at all and 100% virtuous. If I started looking at the lottery numbers from the next day when I couldn't say that, yes, it benefited me, but it's going to rob someone else of something that they could have gotten, that's no longer virtuous because now it affects other people. So the stockbroker who knows how to do stocks, but just benefits themselves and tells nobody and doesn't try to teach anybody, is following the rules of how to keep something breaking your brain. You see insight into numbers and projections and reading charts and data and using it for yourself and not hurting anyone else by doing it. The virtuous part of the connection to the information that other people don't have.
Okay.
Yeah.
Take this example and explain to me how you see it.
Okay.
So there's been a handful of times where, like, let's say a song gets stuck in my head in the morning. I get up. I've not been listening to the radio. Song pops in my head. I'm humming it all morning. Just happens to be an earworm stuck in my head that morning. I get in the car to go to work. The moment I turn the car on, that song is playing. Coincidence, because maybe it's a popular song. Popular songs get so much airtime in a day, every so many minutes. The likelihood, do the math, that song would have come on at that time, and it happened to be stuck in my head all morning. No big deal. Or receiving information somehow, sort of without realizing it, or something totally different.
Well, which do you want it to be?
What do I want it to be?
So the logical brain is going to want it that you were singing out loud and your iPhone's microphone picked it up and it piped it into your Spotify app and it played a song.
No,
there.
radio.
Hold on. I'm telling you what your brain wants. Your brain wants to have an explanation. The logical side of your brain wants to make it just part of a formulation that didn't have any supernatural carriers, right?
Right.
But the part of your brain that is really, fascinated with supernatural and paranormal, I could tell it, well, taking time away from it, the song in your head and the song on the radio both existed in all of the possibilities for that moment. And when you enter time back into it, you just had the song in your head and had the song on your way to work, and you might be able to pull it off and have the song on your way home, as unlikely as that would be. But if time doesn't exist and that song exists in all snapshots of your experience, and you could, what did something you were going to experience later in the day visit you early on? Well, if time doesn't exist, why would it not? What would it even be like? If time didn't exist and you get to experience something, but time's not part of it, a song takes 3 minutes to play, but there's no time. So the song is just one grain of something that can visit you and then expand when it visits you and it becomes a song again, just like the computer thing. Like, what is an email as it's going through the network cable as it gets to the other computer? It's just a grain that again gets translated back up.
I may be way off here.
Yeah.
So technically then, would you say the song is stuck in my head
Yes.
after hearing it, but then I heard it later when I think it's later? Time doesn't exist. Maybe I heard it first, got stuck in my head. That's why it's in my head.
You're looking at the phenomenon instead of the what it would take for that to exist, right? Already take the phenomenon happening, knowing that something's happening there, and then engineering it to find out how you could have fetched a untranslated version of a piece of information and gotten access to it before time had a chance to deliver it to you when it was actually being realized. How did you do that? And so the phenomenon, I mean, that I know that's the sexy part to most people. They want to see the demonstration, the knife cutting through the can. Like, that's the good part of it, right? That's the where you get your biggest dose of chemicals from it. But dig into the more boring portion of whether or not you believe in time, and that you have access to information. Once you bar time, then you have all information that's available to you at any given time, right?
Okay. So it's the idea of maybe I already knew that song it was possible to have that song at any time.
Yeah.
So that's maybe how I got it, is it's possible to have that anytime.
Because there is no time.
I was noticing it then, when really it could have, I don't really know.
All right, so here's what I want you to do. This is the strategy, and this will kind of reveal itself. And the people in this audience that are, arguing with these words,
I think we have lost our minds.
Well, yeah, baby. And that is half of this battle, is keeping your ego in check. That all of these words that I'm saying, even if they're not being articulated well, they're all truths, right? And if you take any of them and say, if I haven't experienced one of these truths and you want to experience one of those truths, here's how to do it. Don't argue with me how you think you can eat a muffin and run a marathon. Take some of the elements of what it takes to be able to run the marathon in its full glory, right? By taking all of the substance of what makes marathons possible and necessary and possible. And so, like, here's the deal. Have you, when you sleep at night, when you go to an unconscious level, does time play out the same way it does when you're awake?
It seems to.
It does? On the outside or the inside? Like
On the outside.
the outside, it's going at full time, and when you're unconscious,
Oh, it goes
flies
faster.
by.
Yeah.
Right? So you don't live real time in your dreams and while you're sleeping, because that would be crazy.
Like
right?
when you have surgery and the moment they put you out and wake you up, you think that surgery was 2 seconds.
So this won't happen, but I'm going to tell you to try this anyway. Because once I tell you to do this, you won't be able to do it.
Okay.
If you came to this conclusion on your own, you're going to have to forget that I said this in order to get it to work.
Okay.
Okay, so here's what I want you to do. I want you to try to meditate. And
that's hard.
Oh, hold on. But that's not even the hard part. That's the easy part.
God.
I want you to meditate, and I want you to try to get to such a quiet level, really close to sleep, where time, right, changes in your perception. Where you think you've been meditating for 5 minutes and 2 hours have gone by. I want you to get close to the unconscious level like you are with sleeping. In the beginning, like your meditation doesn't really speed much time up because you're not really getting deep into meditation. Where you might feel like you just possessed a quieting thought for 5 minutes, but on the outside world, 2 hours have gone by. That's a possibility, and that's going to be the practice.
And you know you're not asleep.
You know you're not asleep. You know you're not asleep. You're just reaching, and I'm going to call it unconscious level. It's really not unconscious, but you're getting to a level that is unconscious like when you're sleeping. And try to do that over and over again. But once I tell you to do this, you're going to be fixated on the passage of time, and then you're going to be pay attention to the passage of time, which means you're not going to reach the level of meditation.
Yeah, that's my biggest obstacle. My biggest hurdle is anything I try to do mentally like that.
Because
I can't turn off the, is it happening? Is it happening
make
now?
this connection. Remember I said, don't get fixated on the phenomenon. Don't get fixated on the passage of time. That's where you're going wrong. You can't reach these levels because you're focused on the demonstration part of it. Because that's what you hear. That's what makes it appealing to most people. The stockbroker says, hey, this guy turned $10,000 into $1 million, right? That's the demonstration. Like, that's what buys you in. Mm-hmm. But everything else that I would say as a stockbroker, I'm telling you about charts and projecting and making projections based on chart readings and whatever. None of that buys you in, but that's the stuff that's making it happen. In order to get you bought in, I have to say, I can give you 5,000 returns because that's the demonstration. Most people are fixated with I want to go to a meditation level that makes the passage of time on the outside 20 times what's on the inside. And that's what breaks the ability to be able to get down to a level of meditation is the output, getting fixated on the output instead of the input.
Or what about the opposite where, I mean, I've had nights where I'll go to bed, let's say it's, I don't know, 9:30, and I'll wake up to go to the restroom, feels like, oh God, I've been asleep forever. I wonder if it's almost time to get up. It's got to be middle of the night, probably 2, 3 a.m., and it's 11. And I'm like, 9:30, and it's only 11. And I thought hours had gone by.
It works both ways. Sometimes I felt like I slept for 5 minutes and it's really been 8 hours. And sometimes I feel like I slept 8 hours and it's only been really 5 minutes.
Yes.
Okay. So again, when you reach that level, now let me give you a little hack, right?
Okay.
And this is the one I use every single day, and it takes no energy, but it does take a little bit of delusion.
Okay.
Right? So you asked, what happens if you try to meditate and you fall asleep? I can guarantee you that when you're practicing, you will fall asleep because you don't know the barriers between going full unconscious and not. So guess what you do every night anyway?
Fall asleep.
You fall asleep. So there's a sweet spot as you're going to sleep. You are going to reach a state of meditation that is that sweet spot. Probably only a couple of minutes before you go too far and you go into sleep. So if you do the things that you would do meditating to connect to information, you can do right before you fall asleep to take advantage of that connection between that fabric of no space-time and going into your unconscious world when you have to sleep anyway. It's almost like a gift from your biology that you're going to get into the meditative state regardless if you want to or not. And go ahead.
And it would have to sort of be that like laying in bed, ready to fall asleep time too, because I've also noticed not only is it sort of quieting my thoughts and not being hyper focused on what I'm doing, but the idea of sort of just totally blacking out, not paying attention to anything, just existing while things are happening around me is a little unnerving. It almost feels dangerous. Like my senses will not, like, no, you've got to keep an ear out. You know, what if somebody's next to you? What if something happens? If time does pass and you are unaware, what just happened, you know, it's very sort of makes you feel a little insecure.
Yeah.
And that would be difficult to get around too.
Yeah. But practice it and play with it a little bit because you're doing it anyway. Right. But really the only difference is if you're taking that real estate that you know you might have an hour, a half hour, like my ring tells me when my brain activity starts getting into that mode, right? And so,
which I am skeptical, but
what?
The gadgets, the watches and the rings that tell you all these things happening inside your body because they sit on top of your skin, I'm a little skeptical of.
Remember that? We'll do a show on that.
Okay.
We'll do a show on biometrics and measurements.
Because my husband does that. Oh, my watch said I had so many minutes of REM sleep. I said, it doesn't know that.
Okay. So next show, let's get...
Okay. Note to self.
But anyway, if you watch as like you go to bed at, I don't know, what time do you go to bed?
On a weekday, like 9:30.
Okay, so you're in bed at 9 o'clock.
Mm-hmm.
You turn the lights off. You're not looking at your phone. You're not watching TV. You're just in that space of no external input. Mm-hmm. Maybe you put the white noise machine on so that there's something in the background, but there's nothing really to pay attention to. And then thoughts come into your head about things you're thinking of as you're going to sleep. Using that time to stop thinking about those things, putting those in the container of I'll get to those tomorrow. And I like to do a good bit of taking anything I know I will be thinking about later and dealing with them before I hit the pillow. So there's really nothing in my head going into sleep. Mm. You might have a window of 10 minutes when your brain fully stops thinking and processing things till it hands it over to the subconscious. So what you want to do is you want to be open to the possibilities that information might visit for you. And all you really want to do is let's keep my third eye open to what I'm going to be exposed to. Try to, in what form does it take? Is it big colors? Is it numbers? Is it intuitions? Is it feelings? Like how would the information be able, to get to you? And then make a requirement of that information, not a force, because you ruin it if you start giving Mr. Logical thing, but pick out your blue car. It would be kind of cool if music notes started talking to me. I'd really appreciate that, and that would be a cool thing. But then after you say it, put that to bed. And don't force it. Don't be looking for it. Just be open to it.
So I've done similar things like this, but I think I force it, like you said.
You do. Everybody does.
Yeah, there was one time where it's so funny you even said third eye. Is like I went through a phase where I was like real interested in the pineal gland in your brain, which people call the third eye, and opening it and getting information and all this thing, and is this real and whatnot. And so one video I watched had said, give yourself something to look for. I want to see a purple elephant, whatever. One day I said, I want to see a pink heart. And I chose pink because red would be too easy. If you're going to see a heart somewhere, it's probably going to be red. I want to see a pink heart. But I did the whole rest of the day. Like, I'm looking at every billboard, every sign, every person. And just about the time where I'm like, this is silly, I ended up coincidentally taking a different way home that night. Went through this neighborhood, which I go that way sometimes, but it's not my usual route. But just a couple of stops I had to make. I ended up going this way. And there was a little girl walking on the street with a pink T-shirt and a heart on it. And I went, close enough. I found it.
See,
but I looked.
Again,
I really looked for
it. The wrong part of your brain is what you're using to find your pink heart, right? You are using your conscious mind.
I was actively looking.
Right.
Yeah.
And so the conscious brain is at a big disadvantage when you have the subconscious brain that doesn't need you to be thinking about it to be ready to receive information. But we're receiving all of our information from our processing part of our brain, our, the visuals, the the auditory, like the mathematics, like all of that. You're looking for something that is subtle information from a very sophisticated side of your brain. So you're going to miss it. You got lucky that you saw a heart at all when you start looking for the blue car using your conscious brain. You engage the subconscious brain when you let it pay attention to things that doesn't even get to enter into your subconscious, or your conscious brain. So your conscious is the one that's working against you. Your subconscious is working with you.
So what is it in instances like this happens to me? Not often, but often enough to know it happens. I'll see something that will stand out to me. And at the time, for no reason, I will notice a truck parked somewhere and what's on that truck. I don't know why it stands out to me. I just happen to look at it a little longer than anything else. And then later I'll see that truck somewhere. Or someone's tattoo that I just happen to glance and it's on their ankle. And it stands out. And even for half of a second, my brain will even go, why are you noticing this? I mean, it's something that I'll just mental note, and then I'll see that tattoo somewhere else, and it means nothing. I got nothing from it other than a cool, what a coincidence. I just saw that. One example, and I think I've maybe even told you this before, I was driving somewhere one morning and I happened to pass this banquet center and there were Coca-Cola trucks because obviously they're getting ready for a party, a banquet of some sort, and Coke's dropping off Coke for it. And I just remember looking like, that's a lot of Coke trucks in that parking lot. And then I went about my morning. And I don't know why that captured my attention, but it did. I'm at work hours later, and a delivery man comes in wearing shorts. And I swear to you, had a Coke bottle tattoo on his leg that looked like it said banquet. And I'm like, banquet center, Coke trucks, Coke bottle, the word banquet. Later. And again, never went anywhere other than that, but I was just like, what is happening? Is that something I'm doing? Is that information I'm receiving? How do you characterize those little coincidences like that?
Again, you're fascinated with the demonstration. Because that's the exciting part, right?
Uh-huh.
What's the utility? Then what did you do?
I myself said that was cool, and then I moved on. Like, that was it.
Okay, so you're at a magic show, right? And the guy pulls a rabbit out of the hat, and it's like, how did that happen? Right?
Yeah.
So either you're on the audience side where the presentation is the only meaningful, so you can get surprised by something that you don't understand, or you're on the engineering side where you're behind the table and you make the thing happen. I'm trying to take you from audience level and bring you back behind what makes the mechanics of this stuff happen. So being able to take, how's the rabbit hat trick done, right? You'd be satisfying and ruining the trick, right? If I was like, here's the deal. There's a thing called sleight of hand, right? It's where engaging someone over here. All the practice is get some movement over here and practice making this hand not as noticeable, right? That's first step of the rabbit trick and understanding the rabbit trick. Do you want to know the answer as like the magic pill that makes it happen? Or do you want the disciplines of making all of that stuff happen when you have sort of like a infrastructure that makes that stuff happen? That's the difference between where you're at. You're in the audience being enthralled by the pulling the rabbit out. And here's where I want you to be over here, which is meditation and connecting information, suspending beliefs and whatever. So whereas I can't take your Coke truck thing, I mean, the best I can tell you is the same thing I did on the other ones. You are on accident sometimes capturing information that you probably didn't know how you got, and making some connections on things you don't quite understand without a utility to never be able to make something like that happen on demand. It's the same answer over and again. So when you see a phenomenon, it's sort of like the first step into trying to figure out how to use that as a useful tool. Like, just like, hey, when we sleep at night, we have a time difference between if they asked us when we woke up how much time, we'd very rarely be correct. But then not saying like, oh, when you sleep, time changes. Not knowing what to do with it, has no exposure to it, can't do it on demand, and doesn't have an understanding, we're right where everybody else is. And I know I'm using you as this, but I'm talking to all people who have this amazing computer brain that has so much more abilities, and we get so distracted by the fireworks that shoot off every once in a while to ever dig into it, to know how to use this thing.
So do you believe in coincidences? Do you think there are things that are just coincidence?
Coincidences require time, and I do not believe in time. So I answered that on
no coincidence.
No coincidences.
So what do you say to people that call those little things like God winks, or they think that's a
connection of
message from
information
God?
That is, there's all of the information, everything is in the real universe.
Not a message from God, just something you picked up.
Information. Like, again, the attributing where the information comes through would be a disservice because there's no utility in that, right? You might end up at God. You probably will end up at God, right? When you take order that can't be explained otherwise, there has to be an orderer, right? And who is that orderer? Well, it ends up being someone who's better and different than you. So who is that person or persons? Well, it's God.
Somebody that orchestrated the
exactly.
order.
And if they don't know the bounds of space and time, then they can truly engineer the perceptions of where we're here. And there could be random order where, you threw the confetti out and the throwing it was all your responsibility. What happened to the confetti was up to it. There was free will and there was, some variables that were not controlled. Right. But there's never nobody. It's not confetti and nobody threw it. The information is somewhere. We just don't know the source. We just don't know who's responsible. And it doesn't matter who is responsible.
I mean, I've heard things like God is absence of time. God doesn't have time.
Correct.
So really, you're just sort of tapping into that same idea.
Yeah.
Which I guess then you could loosely say is connected to him. Or he's the one controlling it, so to speak, because it's a thing.
Yeah.
And it came from somewhere.
Right.
And okay.
Yeah. And there can even be a God's God, right? Because then if you arrive the fact that there's something outside of our experience that is God, God might also have a God that created this God. You might have modular, right?
I feel like, isn't that sacrilegious? I don't know.
It's a question. I don't know that there is a God, and I don't know if there is a God's God. Information, when I characterize the origin of the stuff we experience, it comes from something or someone that's not us, and that something or someone is then God to me. And it always ends up there, no matter how I do the math. It all comes from that placeholder that I'm going to call God.
It's the whatever force, being, thing, whatever is in connection to all of it.
Correct. And if that information is there, can you tap into it? Absolutely. It's just information. And so if you can tap into information about a remote viewing a sign in Libya right now, if that information exists and you can put your brain on a frequency and there's a possibility and potential, could a human being get to a level where they quell their conscious brain quiet enough to be able to tap into frequencies and energies that are outside of even spatial time and tap right into, the God stuff? Absolutely.
You've done this.
Done what?
Like tapped into things,
every day.
Remote viewing.
I have such a regimen. I let my logical brain allow me to calculate, go into these moments where I get constant exposure to information. And sometimes I make sense of it. Sometimes it's totally meaningless. And I still go through the regimen because I'm always getting that information.
Well, didn't you say the point is to sort of then do something with it?
Yeah, for sure.
What do you do with it?
What do you mean?
When you get information, what do you do with it?
So most of it is in instinct or what's the other one? Can't think of the word right now.
Like the opposite of instinct?
No, it's instinct as well. When you get women have.
Oh, intuition?
Intuition.
Okay.
Instinct and intuition. Okay, so like when you're doing, you ever do Sudoku?
No, I know of it, but I've never.
Okay, Sudoku is good brain training. Okay, so basically what it is, it's a grid pattern and has numbers, and there's some rules governing how often the numbers repeat themselves and any, horizontal, in a box, whatever. And so there's just enough information on the board in some spaces and not enough information on the outside of the board. You can get, if you just had a grid pattern, right, Sudoku wouldn't be useful because you don't have an origin or starting point of having some information. So let's just say, those 99% of people we usually talk about, they need sure things, right? They need a Sudoku board that there's only one possibility. Like 9 is the only thing missing, and so there's really no probabilities, risks, or formulations that go into it. Give me the 9, and I'll put in the 9, and I'll be happy because there wasn't any kind of downside risk, right? Mm-hmm. So anything that's below 100% has a chance that you have an 80% chance of success and 20% chance of failure. And you got 40% chance of success, and you have 60%. And every potential, all the way down to 0, right, is going to make a requirement of how comfortable you are doing something that has a higher risk potential. Okay? But if you tap into information that other people don't have, then you can skew the risk potential upward, right? Mm-hmm. Something that mathematically and logically would present itself as a 40% chance of failure, you can use your intuitions to have your subconscious and the information that's outside of time and space tell you how to fill in the rest of it. Something that you should do, something you're going to do, something you're going to break through and do. And once you start getting extra information, it means the perceived world said you should do something, right? But the phenom outside of that logical world says you should do it, and you keep doing it.
So you could sort of take an instance or a decision that any normal person would say, well, you got a 50-50 shot.
Exactly.
And you're like, I don't. I actually have like a 60-40, or something where you would just know of a better guess.
Yeah, so my logical brain is good at calculating odds and increasing odds in the real space. And so I can get something that's a coin flip, we'll say like blackjack, right? I can use blackjack to take me up to 51%. I get a higher advantage over my disadvantage. But then I'm capped because even the mathematics can't take me beyond what that logical game, how the game was comprised. But then you take intuition and you can get into numbers and you can get into formulations that you don't have readily available. So for instance, let's just say you have two people that are potential mates, and you're like, which person should I choose, right? Mm-hmm. And you look at their stat sheet, and the stat sheets say like don't really give you enough information, but you're going to marry somebody. Which somebody are you going to pick, and how are you going to choose? Well, we use those same kind of intuitions. Now, what if you used information that had a sort of like a ethereal source versus, just flip a coin and be able to pick it? Which one is more valuable? The ethereal, like taking something that extra information and choosing more often than not. So I probably have, I use my access to information to choose things that have a really high risk potential. And I am successful at those things more than I should be because of the connection with my intuitions, that other extra information.
Yeah, it would be interesting to sort of tap into that. I've had situations where I guess maybe I would call it like, well, what's your gut tell you? What's your gut feeling? Well, I've got no logical explanation to want to choose this person. I just really feel like that's the right choice. But that doesn't always work out. You're like, oh, crap.
Well, it's not developed. Gut and intuition isn't a magical thing either. It's a developed thing. So question should be, how do you develop your intuition and your instinct?
How do you develop it?
It's a practice.
Meditation?
It's a practice. And so for instance, let's just say I set up 4 tiles here. Under 3 of the tiles, there's bombs. You die if you step on those tiles, and 1's a safe one. Right? You don't know which it is, but now you have to connect to information that allows you, right, to pick your tile because you got a 75% chance of dying and 25%. Now, do you think you could practice your way into dying less often or live? Like, do you think 100% is doable? Even using intuition, do you think that always selecting the one that's not a bomb is possible?
I want to say no, but I don't know. Maybe.
Well, and that's really the logical side of your brain is going to calculate it. You have if I gave you 4 times, the math says that you're going to choose the right way 4 times, or 1 out of 4 times, right? Because that's what the math said was going to happen. Even if you just did it totally illogically, you're randomly selecting one, right? And then if I said do it 100 times, observe 100 times, see if you can get some patterns. Maybe you see, like, we can go in close succession. One of them lights up more often than the other one. They're streaky, where they don't look random. There's some math in it that you're not seeing. You can tap into pattern recognition, right? And then you can add one more element of math. You're like, that one I see way less often light up than the other 3. So you took instead of just making it a gamble, you're like, I'm going to pick that one more often. And maybe when you do that over your next 100 times, instead of it being 25%, you're at 33%. So you took a little piece of information. Now, you didn't go to absolute 100, but you increased the potential from 25, which you would have gotten if you were just gambling and random, and you're at 30-something.
Is this sort of like when I was in college, we had a class that one segment of the class is we were talking about how to make good guesses on tests if you truly have no idea. I do not know and it's multiple choice. If you are faced with a multiple choice question and you honest to God have no earthly idea what the answer is, then you learn things like it's a fact that C is the most common multiple choice answer. So keep that in mind. Statements that are all or never, like always, this always happens, this never happens, is usually false because nothing is always or never. So don't pick that one. And you learn these things of how you can sort of deduce what the best odds are to get the correct one, even though you did not know the correct answer.
Accidentally exposed the answer, but you just answered it. So your question is that how do you practice developing your intuition? And the answer is practicing through something to pick up a different set of information that you would not have if you didn't start the practice. It gets revealed, like if you didn't watch the squares 100 times, you wouldn't notice something about them and you wouldn't be able to draw off a second tier piece of information, right? But if you don't connect to those things, so where do you get your information? Personal experience and also connection to the information of all things that have been experienced and seen and said in the world before you. You got both of them to draw on. But you got to create a rule set based on the information that can be collected. Otherwise, it's just gambling. And gambling doesn't have something, you get the high highs. That's why I call the demonstrations. You get stuck on the wins in spite of the low probabilities or that instead of the new information that can be revealed by the experience. So you're either going to watch the tiles or you're going to connect to the mathematics to all the ethereal information that you can pull down. But you have to do both.
So you still have to make as many observations as possible.
Yep.
But then tap into more.
It's more so action based. Okay? Because if you tap in, like you say, I want to get a close parking spot at work, right? And you don't have the information, like what time do you leave? What equals a close parking spot? You know, do I have to change the hours that I get there? Change the pathway that I get there? What do I have to do to accomplish getting a close parking space at work? Well, first thing, is it possible to get a close parking spot? Yes. Do I have access to information that gets me the close parking spot? Right? But the information's out there either by the experience of other people or information that you can go and get out, you know, go out there and get yourself. And it's both. So most of the time, my intuitions lead me to actions, and the actions collect the data that fills in more of the potentials, and then the thing is revealed on the other side of those 3 steps.
So what would you say if you were like, well, I watch the parking lot over a period of time. I see what cars are there and when. I see what time they come in and when people leave. So now I know that if I want this parking spot, I need to come on this day at this time.
Yes.
Is that not just then solely your observation and doing?
What do you mean?
Are there ethereal things at play, or that is just you did that?
Well, you can be just like if I counted cards in blackjack and I never made any intuition, decisions, then I would just be playing the math out, and that wouldn't be inspired by the mathematics of the ethereal or whatever. Mm-hmm. If there were some judgments that I had to make that I trusted my gut, I didn't calculate the math. I couldn't tell you where the deck was in the count right now, right? Mm-hmm. But my brain does, and the information I know does. So I made the decision that I would have made if I had been counting cards with the same accuracy as connecting to information that time and space hasn't delivered me. But again, it's just a practice. You do it often enough, and if you can get over the fact of like, I'm doing this so that I can win the lottery, and still do it no matter if you win the lottery or not, because if you get set on an end and the information you're tapped into has nothing to do with the end that you sought out for, you'll miss the whole practice.
I want to learn how to do this.
Well, I gave you the hack. Uh-huh. The first thing you're going to do is give yourself that full hour before you go to bed, or half hour or whatever, and take advantage of that meditation space that's being delivered to you every single day right before you fall asleep, and observe. Just get super curious about what comes through, and do that every day.
Even if for a while it is just, all right, I'm observing.
Yeah. You got
I'm laying here
really your
talking
first
to myself.
Quelling that dude is your first thing. And once you're doing different things, then you're not taking advantage of the hack. Obviously, you're falling asleep, right, every night, and obviously, right before you fall asleep comes a deep meditative state that allowed you to go to sleep. You're just going to make that space as big as you can and pronounced as you can, and keeping other things out of it.
How do you know you had that? If you were like totally void of just thought and paying attention to your surroundings and what's happening to you, how do you know when you had that meditative state versus
That's logical, boy. He wants to know that. He wants to know.
Will I just know?
It's there. You don't have to know. It's there.
So I may not know that I entered this space.
You're open, right? You're ready for the information that when this space reveals itself, you're listening. It doesn't have any requirements. It doesn't have to do a dance for you. It doesn't have to announce itself.
Here I am.
You don't. The more you pay attention to the proof that there is a space, just trust me when I say that it's there, right? And it's probably little and very quiet. All you have to do is get quiet enough so that it opens and allows itself to talk to you more than it's doing right now.
So have you ever been to where you are falling asleep? You can hear people, you can hear the TV, you can hear things around you. You know you're not in a deep sleep, but you get these images like your brain's starting to dream, like you are falling asleep, and then maybe you sort of come out of that again. Would you say that once you reach that imagery, you're asleep? It's before that.
You're probably right in the thick of it. If you're ready, like at any moment you can conk out and enter that other world, then that's the space that you want to be looking for.
But the space would be if I kind of open my eyes and say, I know I just started dreaming. That wasn't it. It would have been.
Listen, Take everything you think you know and throw it in the trash can. I
don't know anything at this point.
Okay, so don't even talk about it. Don't try to compartmentalize it. Don't know that you have any relationship with it. You don't even listen. You're a newborn baby right now, and you're going to experience sleep for the first time, and with the most, just lily white new experience. Right? And all you want to do is see what happens, and that's it. You don't want to know what it's all about and what role it plays or whatever.
So do you think dreams mean something, or are dreams just your brain?
Don't get hung up on it. I'm telling you, you are talking your way into letting this hack go to waste, because now you're going to worry about when you're sleeping, what's going to come next. And I don't want that to be populating your brain.
So what do I do? Just go to bed and don't think about anything?
Yeah, just like a baby would. Think, what would a baby be doing right now? A baby would be like closing her eyes because they're all heavy and like, oh, look at all this cool stuff. I've never seen this before. And what's this new stuff? And when your brain kicks in and says, I know exactly what this is. Say, I'm a baby today.
I'm a baby. I don't know.
I'm going to look at the colors and the shapes and the feelings and the pressures and everything that's there. Like, oh, this is new. This is awesome.
But do you remember that?
Doesn't matter. It does not have a responsibility
to
remember
questions.
Or useful, or you're going to need to do something with it. You're just an observer, and you're going to get to observe again in the future. So
will I know I observed?
I don't know. It's up to you. And how?
Well, I may not even know I observed anything.
You got to be totally willing that the information gets passed to you, and you might not know what to do with it, or recall it, or anything, and be completely at peace with that, because it's going to happen again the next day. And the next day, you can take a little bit more.
Well, I must be at peace with it, because apparently I'm doing this every single day, and I don't even know it.
Every single night.
I'm getting information.
You're getting information.
And I just don't know it.
Nope, because you've just been doing it a million times. And so you're just like, it's just the same road that you take to work every day. The same cars, the same lights, the same bridges and underpasses, the same speed limit. Like, you just go with it when you go to sleep. You've taken it all for granted. So if I told you that there was a really good donut shop on your way to work. Oh, let's not use donut shop. Let's use something, a coffee shop, like really good coffee shop. And you never see the freaking coffee shop because you're just in a zone, right?
Yeah.
You've been doing it wrong this whole time. You're not taking advantage of how the sun sets over that hill because you're just on your way to work and in your zone. But I'm like, let's pretend like you've never been this way to work. You've never even been in this country before. And all these trees are just spectacular. You've never seen snow. You ever see someone down south come up here and look at the snow and they're just like, I want to look at it because I don't see this every year. And there are people who lived here are like, it's just freaking snow. Get over it, right? You're missing some magic in the things that you have a close relationship with, you do every day, because you've already compartmentalized that. And if you've misused it and you're not taking advantage of the snow, somebody snaps you out of it and say, hey, come look at the snow with me. You're like, yeah, it's been a long time since I looked at the snow. So what about
in the case of people that are aging and are getting Alzheimer's and dementia, where they truly do forget about things that was once extremely familiar and mundane to them? You know, they could drive somewhere that they've driven 100 times and now they get lost. Or they see something or a person that they see every day for years and years and years, and now it's a totally different person to them. They don't know them. Could they then sort of be in a space to interpret new information or
well, it really depends. If you're Alzheimer's, or if you've got a disease where what we're doing here is we're creating possibilities in our brain, which changes how our brain fires. We're opening new neurons. When you have a possibility, a neuron will fire in a different direction and look to make a connection with another neuron. When it does that, you create a new sort of branch in your brain that wasn't even there before. Once that branch is created, then when you use it a whole lot of times, it gets stronger, and the impulses and the currents over those neurons get stronger and stronger, and then you have a developed neural process that wasn't there before. All right? So that's just like lifting weights. The people who build up that muscle through the repetitions of their exercise schedule get bigger muscles, more defined, and whatever. If somebody's got a debilitating disease where it's doing the opposite, where neurons are decoupling and they're deteriorating, there's less ability in their brain every single day. So if you take someone who had a job that was super, stressful and important and the brain was active all the time, take them out of that, and then the brain starts to say, well, I guess I don't need this. This is a waste of energy and components. They start decoupling a lot of neural processes. Then you have the breakdown of abilities rather than the buildup. People never need to stop developing new neural processes. All it takes is busting out of their normal routines and contemplating and thinking about and practicing something that's new. And then by default, you get new generation of neurons and new activity. So you bring your brain to life in a different direction. So does that answer your question?
I think so.
Okay.
I think so. It's more like, in my mind sort of went like the difference between keeping that information but choosing to look at it differently, maybe bypassing what you know.
Well, you'll be doing it on purpose because you will be exercising neurologic or neurons that exist and just using them in a different way. So let's just say we took you and we took a component out of your daily thought. So maybe you did prayer every morning at 6:00, right? And you did it for years. I know that you're going to have faith muscles and developed ways of talking to things that you don't understand. And then we're going to stop doing that for a year. If I looked at your brain the same after that year, it's got different wiring because you stopped using it. So it took energies and materials and put it in a different direction. Mm-hmm. But then if you went back to reading the Bible and doing your prayer in the morning again, you would regenerate those same processes you did the first time, probably faster than you did the first time. But if you have a person who's literally on fire, well, metaphorically on fire, where they're burning through, there's something about them that is taking healthy, used neurological processes and breaking them for external reasons, then you could be building new ones over here, but it's on fire over here and it's being destroyed at a clip faster than it's probably being regenerated. So there will be a point, even if you're, inspiring new growth, that the consumption and the destruction of what's happening will probably catch up and not give you a net positive.
You won't have that muscle memory.
Yeah, I would probably put the fire out first, and then maybe you rehab someone back from, destruction. So if someone did something chemically destructive to their brain, like they, took poisons and in their food, and they did it on purpose through drug use or whatever, you'd have damaged a lot of the brain, by that point.
Yeah.
And is it something that can be built back? Yeah, but it's going to be different. Like when you have networking cables in your brain that connect different areas and give you a profile of thought, right? Can you ever recreate that in any other way than going back to day one and reliving your life the exact same way that it did over time to rebuild that network back exactly the way as it before? No. If you stopped right now, you could, if you got, let's just say you took all the neurons out of your brain and you have no thought whatsoever, but you had enough growth like you were a child and you started regrowing a brain. If you did it at 20 and you did it at 40, right, could you do it again the second time? No, I think you'd be a completely different individual. New experiences, new frictions, brand new brain, thought patterns, and whatnot.
Interesting.